share screen with you if you're going to do that main.
Do you see the content?
Cool. Okay. Yeah, I'll follow your lead.
Did it pop out at you? Or is it
Whoa.
Yeah.
Do you see that?
Yeah.
Infinite screens. It's cool when you do something, you watch it propagate, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a slight lag. This is like Stranger Things.
Okay, and then you should be the main person.
So
All right.
cool. Just go for it.
Yeah, you can turn the video off. I think it just your screen.
Okay, so turn my video off.
Yeah, there you go. And then whatever your screen.
Great. And this is shared now.
Hang on. I'm not seeing your screen. Okay, once you go in, should be good to go.
Cool. Is everything okay?
I'm not seeing your screen, so if you go to the YouTube deal,
The Hangouts deal.
go
Do I?
to screen share at the far left. There you go. That's
Okay. Cool.
perfect. Now I see your stuff.
Awesome. Okay. Cool. So we can begin, I guess. Thanks for coming, everyone. Yeah, this should be like a 20, 30 minutes tops presentation. And I'll just say right off the bat that there are probably a lot of things that I try to put something in there for everyone. I realize people are coming from different experience levels of using Markdown. So since there's so few of us too, if you have a resource you want to share or something, we can make this a sort of discussion and just share different things that we're aware of. I know something about LaTeX was shared earlier that I thought was pretty interesting. So does everyone have the materials, the workshop zip folder that I sent out? Cool. So if you open that up, you can follow along. And I believe the workshop folder looks something like this. And so we'll open up class_script.rmd, and that's what I'm looking at right now.
If we don't have that ready, should we panic or just follow along?
You could just follow along. If you actually wanted to like run different commands and try the little questions I put up, then you might want to load that up. But you certainly don't need it immediately. Should be okay. So yeah, so the goals of the workshop were just to cover some basic formatting in Markdown, probably stuff you know already. Organizing code, some of the advantages of Markdown in doing that. And then an introduction to some tools for creating a resume and a website. I tried to look at responses that people sent to the survey and integrate that into this little workshop. So first things first, just how many of you just are familiar, have used it before? Okay, so almost everybody, and then those that haven't, this is like all new. Okay, so I'll try to like find a middle road here. So this is what a Markdown document looks like. To make a new Markdown file, you could just go to RStudio File and then choose Markdown. And it prompts you with this little, the GUI prompts you with, put a title in. You can just skip this. And it creates basically this title. So you can change this right here. And then it gives you this basic format. You can also make one of these just by saving a document .rmd, but you'd have to use this formatting in order for R to understand it and for the package knitter to turn it into a PDF or an HTML document. So yeah, we'll close that. So this is a document I made for the class, and we'll follow along with it. Just so first things first, this right here is the YAML header. And this specifies some text to render. So it's like the title, the author, and the date, and plus some global options. So I've told RMarkdown that this is going to be an HTML document. So when it knits this together, it will be a document that I can open on the web, or that I could share and people would open it in their browser. Or I could publish it online and people could access it at a link, and I can continue to make changes to this code and the changes would display. So that's one benefit. And there are all sorts of things you could do with that. This right here is a chunk, and so we're going to ignore this for now, and we'll come back to what chunks are. But a brief note on formatting. When you have one hashtag like this in front of some text, it means to treat it as a header 1, header 2, header 3, and so forth. And so when you knit, and I realize I'm jumping around here, so stop me if this is confusing. You can run a command from the console to knit, or you can use this add-in feature in this Markdown in the IDE document. And so what it's going to do is run through the code, evaluate all of the chunks, and then create some output here that you can view in the viewer. Since I made this a HTML document, you can open this in the web and see what the output is. And so that's the header 1. This is header 2. And so you can see how the different just text formatting cues change what actually appears. So just running through this, this is how you do bold text, italics. If you wanted to include a math equation, you would include it with $signs, and then you can use LaTeX formatting in between. And so this will be familiar for some of you that have used Markdown or LaTeX already. So that appears like this. If you wanted to specify code, you would use these backticks. Links would be with brackets and with parentheses. So now I've embedded this URL where you can get a Markdown cheat sheet. So clicking on that will just open the page that I specify. So this is a nice way to, that's just how you embed stuff. So yeah, all of this you can find on cheat sheets online, and it's just like a brief introduction to formatting. You can add, and then here's a note too that's, and just a note on formatting. If you end a line with one space, Markdown will read that as one continuous line. So in this quote, I only end lines with one space by Mark Twain. This is what it renders as. And this block quote before is just this little caret, side caret. But if you end a line with 2 spaces or more, so I've ended this with 3 spaces, read that as a paragraph break, which is equivalent to this. And so now Mark Twain appears on the next line. So that's just like a little, that really aggravated me to learn, so I thought I'd include it.
So if you end up with 0 spaces?
I'm sorry?
If you don't have any spaces, what does it do?
It would be equivalent to, well, let's find out actually. We can try that. So 0 spaces here, we'll make sure, and then we'll knit that. I suspect that it'll just treat it as 1 space. So we can take a look at what that looks like over here. So let's open this up, close this one, and yeah, treat it as 1 space. So yeah, good question. So I'll make that back to 2 spaces. If you wanted to include pictures, like let's say you had a pre-formatted graph, this is my favorite GIF of Obama, especially that one, yeah, where he's like this. He's reading where the wild things are. So you can include pictures or GIFs just with this command. This is a caption right here, so you can write, this is optional caption, and that'll appear next to the picture. So lots of ways to insert figures and pictures, math, text formatting in a very simple way in Markdown, and that's a feature. But now we get to code chunks. And so why chunks? Well, a chunk is where code happens in RMarkdown. It's the same thing as writing code in a .r file. And the advantage of this is that you could run lines of code one by one within the chunk. So I could, if I needed to read in this library, read in this data, and view the names of the data, So these are the column names of actually our class data. So that survey that you filled out is that file. And so we're gonna look at some of our survey responses in a bit. Or alternatively, you could use this play button to run that entire chunk. In your coding, I find myself having to sometimes in a .r file close my entire file because I've done something weird and or I clear all the variables from my global environment and then start rerunning things one by one to debug. And with RMarkdown, it's nice because let's say you open this file, you can just run chunks individually. They're like paragraphs of programming thought. Or you can run all chunks above that chunk. So this just ran everything above. And you can jump between chunks just by clicking here. And you see that they're organized by the headers. So if you wanted to say like, this is my introduction, okay, that's where it takes me there. And now I want to go back to chunk 2. So now I'm here. So it's a nice way to like navigate around and start to organize your programming script as a paragraph or an essay. That's how I like to think about it. So here I give some more intuitive column names to the data. And we'll keep working with this data. But just for a bit, let's just break down the anatomy of the chunk. So in the chunk, it starts with 3 backticks. It always starts with R. And then you can add a title. This title appears here, a meaningless title to rename. So we'll rename that later. And then I have some options after the comma. And so these specify local chunk options. So sometimes when you run R code, the console will print out a message. It'll say something like, this package is deprecated. You should use a different package. If you want to suppress that message in your output, which you would maybe share with a collaborator or turn in as homework or publish online, you can hide it with message equals false. You can also use echo equals false to not display the code, but only display the results. And there are many options you can set in this chunk right here. So you could just add these on like eval equals false. Now, when I run and knit this will not be evaluated whatsoever. So any other code chunk that depends on this too will throw an error because they'll say, well, we couldn't find this code. You didn't evaluate it. Setting local options, let's say if you have hundreds of chunks in your Markdown script, it can be kind of burdensome to write message equals false, warning equals false in all of them. And I usually like to not see warnings when they're being printed out. So you can go up to the top chunk right here in the R setup chunk, and you can set some global options in the knitter package. And that's this thing that's doing the rendering. So this is options chunk, and then you're setting some global options. Echo is always true, warning is always false. And they have default settings, and you can look up what they do. This is just a list of some common ones. So, do you want to display messages, errors, warnings, etc. Yeah, and so this just brings us, we'll get into some coding in chunks after this, but just to a quick exercise set. So if you have something out there, let's just run through these in like a couple minutes, and then we'll move on. So yeah, or I could just do them up here too if you guys just want to see me do them. I'm just going to do them because we'll just keep the flow going.
Yeah.
So if I remove message false in chunk 2 right here, I also have to change it up here because I think I didn't specify it as a global option. And then I re-knit this. What's going to happen is that messages from this chunk right here will be printed out into this document. So let's see. So I read in my DAT, and the message that's printed to the console is, yes, we read it in, this is how we parsed it, and here is your output. And so you can imagine situations where it would be nice to see the message, and also situations where you would not want to see the message. And then I also ran names.dat, and that's going to return the names of all of the columns. So that's what happens when you take away local options like that. So now we'll change it back for this one. So instead of copying and pasting this in every chunk, let's put warning equals false as a global option in chunk 1. So we'll just take this and specify some global options. So these will apply to all chunks now. Just put that in there. And so now all chunks will not print warnings. We can also make it so they don't print messages either.
One thing, Brandon is online and mentioned the error equals false.
Mm-hmm.
That while if you know your stuff is running, that can be helpful, but actually if you don't include that, it just will fail to knit and you will have no idea why. So including that can be useful because it will at least give you some sense of what broke.
Yeah,
so
definitely. Yeah, that's a good point, especially when you're in different stages of like writing.
How does that give you a sense they have your
Right, yeah. Because if there's an error, it'll spit it out. Otherwise, it suppresses that.
Yeah. So I've suppressed it in this case because like I know the code's running. I want to print it to a PDF document, and I just don't want to see that there. I want it to be clean. But yeah, if you were running code, you might want to run it without warning equals false. So these are usually things I enter at the very end, but they're just specifics of code that I thought I'd mention now.
Will the local chunk options override the global?
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. So it's kind of like federal and state control. So let's rename chunk 2 to read data, which is a better description and increases the navigability of the code. So let's just call this read data. And so now chunk 2 is going to be named read data here. So just some basics about navigating. To insert a new chunk, you just follow this shortcut. It makes it easier. It's just Alt-Command-I. That way you're not having to write backtick, 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 or curly brackets R space, backtick, 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 and then enter your code inside. Yeah, what's up?
Also, if you forget the second row of backticks, you can't actually run it like in console. That's the most infuriating.
Yeah, so you need, a chunk is defined by this structure. And so any code in here is where you can run. But if it's not, if you try to run code out here, so let's just do head of that, like this should not evaluate. You cannot run this. This is where you write descriptions about the code so that you can create a more integrated document of code where you're explaining your code perhaps and then showing it and showing the output. So I use RMarkdown mostly for communication. So here we go. Okay, so I think of chunks as paragraphs. So each chunk is a set of operations that I run together. And then when I have a piece that works, I move on to a new chunk. And this makes debugging easier. And also when I look at a script like months down the line, I'm like, oh, this is what I was doing because I took time to annotate and comment my code out and like really explain it. And before, what I was doing is I would be like, here in this next line of code in comments, and that can get kind of cumbersome to deal with, but this is a lot nicer. Just a personal preference.
So would you recommend this for like general data analysis workflows?
I use it in my own. There are for sure going to be reasons why you would want to stick with just an R script. I think if you're doing a lot of like maybe scripting in shell, that it might be, there might be some limitations. I'm not sure. I wouldn't like, I'm generally against like blanket statements like always use RMarkdown for exploratory data analysis. But I think like for me, it's really been helpful. And it's also helpful to think about how am I going to start communicating this, because this will knit into some HTML document or some PDF document. And so how am I telling the story of my data? Where's it going? And then I don't have to like copy and paste in ggSave files and put them in some other PDF because it's already there. So it just kind of streamlines my workflow. So yeah, I mean, in that sense, I do recommend it. I'm going to just really quick jump up here. So if we change this to PDF document and I give you some options, you can knit it into PDF, Word, Beamer presentation, or a slides presentation. By changing those global options, this is going to take a little longer. One of the reasons why I'm doing HTML is it knits really fast, just to show you all. But PDF documents, this should open a PDF when it's done. So here's our PDF, and you can see, you can turn this in. There's some limitations, obviously, like the GIF is not going to move in a PDF that you print out. So, but yeah, let's close this out, change it back to HTML, and move onwards. Good questions, by the way. Okay, so let's bring in dplyr and glimpse the data. And then I just want to show you, like in base R or like a .R script, you would be looking at the console and you might be changing the width of your console just to view this. So you notice it's still printing in the console. So everything you run in a chunk still prints in the console. But it has this nice feature in Markdown of viewing your data in this interactive window that just kind of pops up. And so that's if you run a command like glimpse. But what if you just wanted to look at the data itself? Well, RMarkdown will show you the first 10 rows of your data. And so this is my data frame. It would be the same as going over here into my environment and finding dat. I have some other projects in here, sorry. And then just looking at it in here, right? So I can actually just view it from my script, check a variable I want to check, and keep moving. I can filter through, or not filter, but to see all the questions we asked. So these are the questions we asked in the survey. What group are you from? How many years have you been in your program? What's your experience with Markdown, RMarkdown, LaTeX, etc.? Why do you want to attend this? Are you interested in code, files, resume, creating a website, or other? And
is that specific to our studio, that feature?
Yeah, totally.
Turn it on and off, but I'm not quite sure how. Do you know that?
To turn what on and off?
You can turn that little window on and off. It's an option somewhere.
That's a, you know what? I did not know I could, this window.
Oh, so if you go to under the little wheel there, the little gear above the, right to the
This
next
one?
knit, to the next, no.
This one?
Yeah. So you can turn off, see, this is preview, your pane, and then show previews in line. If you unclick and do
This
chunk
one?
output, either do chunk output in console, it will make you rerun it, but then when you run it, it won't actually show it in your Windows console.
Right. So if you find that feature annoying, I suppose there's a way to.
So you can turn it on and off depending on what you.
Right. Cool. And then this is, I guess, chunk output inline. Okay, so that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Ryan. But I find it useful just in doing exploratory data analysis, and I'm not really familiar with my data set yet to kind of start looking at it that way. Cool. So let's actually bring in ggplot, and the same is true for graphics. So if we were to sort of filter by the group, take the group and then look at the average time it took for people to complete the survey. Undergraduates are the most thorough, taking the most time to complete the survey, whereas every other graduate student had a minute or less to complete this, with folks in entomology and nematology that are presumably the most rushed. Small sample size, but I don't know. It's just what the data says to me. So yeah, you can see things print out there as well, and this is a nice way to see, like, is my code running? Is it producing what I want to produce? How do we feel about potatoes? One of the questions I asked had to do with potatoes, and so it appears that we are a group of people that love sweet potato fries, and I found it interesting that ecologists, represented by this orange block, unanimously select sweet potatoes if forced to choose between them and French fries. So this was quite enlightening. Let's get on to tables. A lot of people, I think 3 separate people were like, I want to make tables. So the out-of-the-box option for making a table in RMarkdown comes from the cable package, or sorry, the cable function within the knitter package. And it's really nice for dumping data straight into a table. So I had this commented out because it takes longer to render, and I wanted to render a few times. So now let's uncomment that. And I'm going to bring in knitter and cable extra. I bring in cable extra just because there are some more options that make tables nice. You certainly don't have to do that. You can actually take this right here and just, oops. Let's just move this down here for now. And if you were to just run your data through this right here, you would have a nice table. But for the heck of it, let's just run it with these other options in cable extra, which allow you to style your table and make it a little nicer. So let's actually knit this and just see it in the document. So this is going to take some time to render. And then how do we feel about potatoes? Tables. So here's cable. And we have, what I did is I took the data and I selected just the group years and potatoes out of it. And then I said, okay, let's make this striped and give it a hover. These are just styling options you can look up, so you can totally ignore this line of code because it's just like, make it a little pretty, but you can just use the base table and it looks great. But I didn't want it to be full width. I wanted to smush it in. So I put full width was false. And like I said, you can look up all of this in the cable extra package. But this is a nice way to view tables. Another option that works well with web pages is the data table libraries data table. And this is getting into the next section of HTML widgets, which are really fun. So let's go ahead and run this. So if I comment this out, and then I'm going to just to save time, comment this right here. And now we're going to knit this up. We'll see what a data table looks like. So notice that, remember, we have our output format is HTML document. So this would not work in a PDF. But since we have HTML as the document, we have, this is our table now. It's the same one. I've selected group years, potatoes, and now I actually selected some more. So the time it took each person to complete the survey and their network ID. This is just some field that's generated by Typeform that I sent you. So you can see there's this nice like hover highlight option. You can show different amounts of entries. So this is great for large data sets. I have a data set of like 30,000 entries in a Shiny app I built, and I used a data table so that people can view the data and then also download it as a CSV and see like how many entries they want to see. Also like filter by group, or sorry, arrange by group name, by years, so you can see them in ascending and descending order. You can search for all the people that like potatoes and see that, oops, French fries. Okay, what's going on? Sweets. Oh, I'm only showing people that like sweet potato fries. I'm not sure why that is. Anyway.
Filter on the left.
In your knitter chunk, you actually filter to just.
Oh, that's why. Okay, cool. Well, let's say I knew that there was someone that, you know, or just people that took 3 years. That's not going to work because there's some like, so you can see that this is like finding the 3 in here and also returning this. So that's not like a very perfect search, advanced search option. But there you go. Thanks. That's a great example. So now I'm just going to see the people, the 5 people from ecology. So that's kind of fun.
Someone can download CSV from this?
That's, yeah, that's extra. So yeah, I think you would actually need like a server-side logic to hold that data somewhere and then give it out as like a clickable option. You might be able to do that in RMarkdown because I know you can like write Shiny functions into RMarkdown. So there's probably a way to do it. But yeah, I did that on like a more, like on an actual site. So it has the data in a server.
So if you're like sharing this with libraries or something,
yeah,
this all gets knitted to an HTML file. You can just send that to them, and they'll open in their browser and they can do all this.
Exactly. So every time I've clicked knit, RMarkdown does 2 things. I'm showing you this viewer because it's easy to see, but what it does is it has to render this HTML from somewhere. So actually RMarkdown is, so here's our working directory. Every time I run knit, it's creating this class script.html file, and then that's showing in the viewer. So I could just open this, and now I have, you know, what we just ran. So our data table should be in here. Beautiful, right? And if I was offline, I could still view this because it's just an HTML file. And you also notice that we have a class script.pdf in here. That's because when I ran knitter and it was specified as PDF document, we created this PDF document.
Is the data set embedded in the HTML, or is it separate?
Yeah, yeah. So if you actually want to get into it, we can open this with Sublime or your preferred text editor, and you can see that this is what knitter has created. So with a little bit of effort, you can tell a program to just write all of this crap, which is really nice. So yeah, the data will be in here somewhere. Like if you were to just search for ecology in this, so you can find out. So here, I think, yeah, I don't know HTML, and that's the nice thing. Like I can do HTML and JavaScript like things without knowing it through this backdoor. So yeah. Okay, let's close out. Let's get back to the script because I don't want to take too much of your time. I hope this is useful. Cool. So that's data tables, and this gets us into the whole world of HTML widgets. So I think they're perhaps one of the coolest applications of Markdown. They get you into sort of start bordering on D3 and JavaScript and other visualization softwares that people in research usually don't use a lot. So it's nice to have those tools at your disposal. Perhaps the most common use of HTML widgets is the leaflet package. So how many of you are familiar with that, have used leaflet? No? This is gonna be so cool for you. I'm so excited. So I'm making this look kind of intimidating and I apologize for that. But leaflet is actually just a few lines of code. And I'm not gonna get too much into the specifics. You can read about it, but I assure you it's quite simple. So let's water.csv, water.dat. And so this is some data from my research. And it basically, we can take a look at it and you'll see that it's basically, there's a well ID, a database, and I chose all the data from 1988. It's a truncated data set. It's the year I was born. My birthday's in a month, so you can, yeah, you know where to find me. Result, latitude and longitude are in there. And so we have some spatial data here. And so how many of us work with spatial data? Oh, this is gonna be so cool for you guys. I'm so excited for you. So you can you work with spatial points data frames then, right? So you can pull out the chords and then you can make those chords into spatial points. And then you can make a spatial points data frame using those points and the data. And so 1 through 4, I'm just omitting columns 5 and 6, which are the latitude and longitude. That's just redundant data anyway. And let's see, in the points data frame, I'm just gonna pass it into a leaflet. I'm gonna add some tiles and I'm gonna add some circle markers. So this is just one very basic, this is all you need for a leaflet. That's the base of it. You pass it into leaflet, you pipe that into some tiles so you can zoom in and out, and you add some circle markers, and oops. And now you have this cool object where you can see that these are the wells in my study. So you can zoom in and it gives you some default options, default base map, default, and so you can start customizing all of this, which is what I've done here. So let's actually close this out.
That was way too cool. I need to remember what's going on here.
Yeah.
So what does the leaflet function do? That first line of that pipe?
It's a good question.
Just make an empty map.
It makes
Yeah. So
using your points to frame it.
Using just an empty, it's basically just loading the Google server
Yeah.
that is running this.
So
behind the scenes.
totally, and so the first argument is a spatial points data frame. So you put a spatial points data frame in, and then that alone is not enough. You have to add some tiles to it, which allows it to zoom in and out, and then you add some markers. You can add pop-ups. You can add all sorts of things. If you're interested in this, I highly recommend just visiting this right here. So this page, there's a go through this class script after if you're interested in some of this stuff. Include all sorts of links to resources, and this is mostly a jumping off point. But
Leaflet has a really good support webpage with all code and how to customize things. But so you can run leaflet, that first line leaflet, and add tiles by itself, and just make a blank map.
Yeah.
There won't be any points in it, but you could search around. It would just be like going to Google Maps online, right?
Okay.
And
Yeah.
then all the other stuff that he's showing is your pieces that you want to add to that.
Like making your map for your project.
totally, yeah. Yeah, and then like Ryan said, I feel like it's one of the most common HTML widgets, and people like to use it. So it's great to display data that may be kind of large, and you can't just throw it up on one map. speaking of maps, I think Ryan, you're doing a map workshop, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
and I'll be talking, I use leaflet a lot, so
Yeah.
there's a lot of cool customizable things you can do, but one caveat I would mention is building leaflet maps within your Markdown, like an HTML, when you knit this to HTML. So if you're including a leaflet map, your HTML, if it's gonna be standalone, is gonna be large, because it has to load all those pieces.
Yeah.
So you can go from, like, without the leaflet map, this HTML is what, like a meg or not even that. I mean, it's pretty small size-wise. With like a map that I've made with hundreds of points on it, you're talking 50 to 100 megabytes in size because of all the pieces.
And
that,
time it takes to knit.
right. It doesn't take too long to knit. It's more the loading the
data.
Yeah.
When you're like reading in a CSV and you're reading in a super big CSV, now you're just reading in like HTML specifications for every point and every pop-up and every, so it just becomes a lot of text, like, because all of those texts have tags and breakers around them.
Because that crazy code that you showed, the HTML, imagine that, like every point has something like that. So your HTML file just did
enormous, yeah.
And then actually like scrolling around and browsing the map, I imagine gets slow if you have complicated polygons.
It's
I'm not sure.
If you have a decent internet connection, it's pretty fast. Like you can store that online. I mean, I'll show examples, but I've got a bunch of layers and polygons, and it actually does really well because one of the things they can do in parse out they can tile.
Oh, so the polygons, what are the polygons local though?
Depends how you build it, but yeah, they can be.
So
we can talk more. Sorry. Okay.
Let's actually do so there's interest in this, which is really cool. And so I just wanted to give you a sneak peek of like some like cooler code. And what I mean by that is like, let's now actually define a color palette, because like the data we're dealing with right now, this water.data set, the results column is actually milligrams per liter of a contaminant total dissolved solids. We know that the cutoff is 1,000 milligrams per liter for salty water, and everything below that's fresh water. So we can define a color palette. And these are the colors I've chosen. I really want to control over it. You can obviously use Color Brewer to find a nice palette. And I specify the breaks here, and then I pass my points data frame through leaflet tiles. And for my circle markers this time, I'm going to change the size, opacity, stroke, and I'm also going to add a pop-up to them. Then I'm going to add a legend as well, and I'm going to change the provider tiles here from that common base map to something that is a little lighter so that my points pop out more. And so I already ran that while we were talking. And so this is what it comes out to. We have a bunch of these files open now. But going down to my leaflet, now this is not right.
This is what happened with Brandon, I think, as well. So
Okay, so I'm screen sharing now.
actually,
Okay. All right, are we back online, right? So
yep.
cool. So, oh, this is not actually working. So let me see. I think it's just maybe at land. So right now, okay, that's not working either. Does anyone have experience? I thought it was just.
It should be land in a year. Whatever year you reference it for.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I thought this is how. I thought you just take whatever that is, and that gives you. But it's not actually doing it.
Sometimes you need to load a package that does that. Cider or one of the other things. I know for my.
I think it might be a knitter actually.
And you specify in the header of your I don't know if you can do it within a chunk. I know I've had to specify at the top of where your bib library is at the top of the.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Okay. So the reason why it's not rendering is because in my global options, I didn't say that there's a bibliography. So actually, if I would have just read my own exercise set, it's in there. So create a table of contents. Oh no, you know what? I didn't actually put it in there. So
Yeah, it's in there. It says bibliography in here.
it does?
Yeah, number 2.
Where? Ah, yes.
Yeah, there you go.
I am so self-betraying. Cool. All right. So now I have bibliography and I've specified, because otherwise, how does the document know where to get the references from? This is how it knows. It goes into my working directory and it finds ref.bib. Now when I knit this, every time, so this at harder 2005, which I get from here in my bib document, is going to appear, is going to appear as a citation. See, harder 2005. And I could, I could make this a little nicer actually, and do that. But the nice thing about this is that in addition to it showing up as a reference, it's going to show up automatically at the bottom. And if there's a DOI, it'll show up as a link. So yeah, modern science, right? Like if you want to share research and have people find your research very easily, there's a way to do it. It also is nice. I like to do this because since we know the last thing are going to be references, I'll usually just put in references right here. And so how this works is that the references are just going to show up in the bottom of your document. And then I think there's also, if you make footnotes as well, those will show up in the bottom as well. So you can throw another header in there that says footnotes if you start using that.
Can you modify it so it doesn't show up as the last thing where you have appendices?
Yeah, good point. You could, yeah, I would have to Google that. I don't actually know off the top of my head.
If you really want to write like a manuscript, there's that might be a separate workshop you could do, because I'm actually starting to write in RMarkdown using the PNAS template, which is in R. So in RStudio, you can just go and be like RMarkdown, click on this, and it has the template for you, and you fill it out. And so, but what happens is behind the scenes, a lot of these things, when these are rendered, they're rendering to PDF, not to HTML. And in doing that, it allows, you can add a bunch of LaTeX sort of code. You don't have to deal with it, it's already done, but that's how everything's specified and say, like, okay, appendices go at the end, bibliography goes at this part, so stuff like that. In just in RMarkdown, it would be not as easy to do. You just want an HTML with, appendices at the end. I would think you would just do, you would have to figure it out and either print your citations separately or.
So here's a PhD thesis in Markdown, not RMarkdown. Looks like there's some Python dependencies here. that I found on GitHub just by Googling RMarkdown. So here we go, RMarkdown dissertation template. And there's all sorts of resources out there. But it just takes being comfortable with this basic format and then like do it if you want. I'm sorry?
No, I was gonna say there's an ecology RMarkdown template that Dave Harrison, I think, made from a while back that's available on GitHub too. If you want any format for UC Davis, ecology, it's like, so.
Okay, so let's look at two more things. We're pretty much done in like 5 minutes here. I'm going to add a table of contents because this is a normal feature that you would want in your, let's say, HTML document or PDF. And so that's really simple. You just add this in the YAML header. So we'll keep our reference in there, but you can't have competing outputs. And you notice there's some redundant information here. So I'm just going to take this one and let's comment that out. So now my output is an HTML document, and with an HTML document, I'm specifying these other options. And this is like, it's pretty picky about the formatting. Like this has to be 2 spaces or tab. And the table of contents is true, and then I'm adding a smooth scroll option, or I'm saying there's not a smooth scroll option, it'll just jump straight there. So now when I knit this, there will be a table of contents, and we can take a look at that. So let's open this up. And so now here is my table of contents, and you notice that it follows the header specifications. Header 1 is a super category, and then everything below that in descending order is a subcategory. So you can jump around to, now I just want to look at the HTML widgets. So now it just jumps straight there because the smooth scroll is false. If smooth scroll is true, it would gently scroll there and you would see text flying. So smooth scroll false is nice when you have a ton of stuff in your Markdown script. Let's add this other, I like this a lot. So I like a floating table. This is a personal preference. It doesn't work for everything, of course. But let's add in table of contents true, table of contents float true. And then the only other thing we changed was code folding is hide now. And so you can probably guess what that's going to do. But code folding takes all chunks of code. This is very helpful when you have really big chunks of code, and it just auto hides them until people expand them. So you can set up, here's a global option, show all code, hide all code. So by default, it's hide all code. And here's the floating table of contents. So off to the side, it's very aesthetic, I know, right? So wide chunks, and it's going to go there. Let's go back to HTML widgets. So our smooth scroll is true here, right? Because it's like, you can see it scrolling through. And now for leaflet, you see all the code chunks are hidden until we expand and collapse them. Or of course, you can go to the top and then show all code. You can play around with this. It's pretty intuitive. So yeah, these are some fun options that you can use. Here's a quick question. So down here so we're on to the last part, which are resumes and websites that people express interest in, and then I'll show you that Shiny app that uses some of this data table that we were interested in. But you notice right here, these are meant to be on different lines, so why did they render on the same line? Yeah, so double space here should take care of that. So yeah, for resumes, I recommend, I've used like a Jekyll theme. I don't really have a standing resume that I'm working on, but if I were to make a standing resume, I'd probably just use Ryan Peake's template, which you can find on GitHub here. And then there's another, Lucy McGowan's CV template's pretty nice too. So let's look at hers. Is that it? Here it is. So this is what it renders to, this PDF. So, you know, this is all a Markdown script with some like, you can just look at the Markdown script and kind of like fit in your own information. So looking at Markdown CV, this is actually in the zipped folder. I included Ryan's CV. I figured he didn't mind because it was on GitHub already. Yep. So I thought it was just the point. But yeah, if you open up this, you can see that here is the Markdown file. So there's a YAML header that's kind of long, but it's just taking some basic information like job title, address, and there are some specifications on how to render each of these. Then he's adding his education under a header 1. These are going to be bold. These are block quotes, right? His titles. And yeah, like it's pretty, it's not that crazy to look at, right? 100 lines of code, 100 lines of script. And then when you knit this up, it's going to look like a nice resume. So boom. What kind of document class is this? PDF document, right?
Where are the instructions on how to render it, and were they embedded in the Markdown?
The instructions to render it are just like however you've scripted this, and then you use the knit command. So this is an add-in, but if you wanted to, you could write like knitter, and then I forget that because I just used knit on the.
So if you go to the files though behind the scenes, the other files, this actually does require, and I gave a little workshop, that tex file.
Yeah.
So if you look at that, actually, the LaTeX sort of code I was talking about when you read the PDF, it gives you a lot of control over like how things look, where you want them to go. The downside is it's LaTeX and it's kind of pain to deal with, to like read. So a lot of the things that these RMarkdowns do is like make it so you don't have to read that stuff, where you can borrow some other people's templates. So they do that for both LaTeX and for HTML, which is nice.
Yeah, and I don't know about you all. I know how many of you have like used LaTeX to format stuff with that, and it's kind of a pain in the ass. And I was doing all my homework in LaTeX, and it just took forever. So when I found Markdown, I was like, this is great. This is so fast. It can integrate R code. It's really good if you use R already. And then there are all of these little extensions. One of them is like resumes and how it links up with LaTeX and HTML and JavaScript, so for online documents. And another thing that it links up with, let's close these out now, what is this? Oh, that's something else. Our websites. So you've seen CV templates, and like Ryan said, I highly recommend just finding a template online and playing with it, especially as a starting point. If you really wanted customizability and control, then go nuts and like make your own and learn some more fancy stuff. But for websites, let's look at these links right here. So I gave you a good blog post about making your own website with RMarkdown and Hugo. So you can read this if you want, and that's a good resource. You can also just look straight at the Blogdown online book. And so this is all about creating your own personal website with Blogdown and Hugo, and there are a lot of templates you can pull. So one template that I've pulled is this, and so instead of knit, I'm going to serve site here.
Blogdown and Hugo, is that similar to like Jekyll?
Yeah, Hugo is like Jekyll, but with a different language. It's like the Google Go language. It's really great for static websites because they just render quickly. So this is a website that I started, but I just have never too many things. But this was just a template, and so I have like a blog here, and you can look at, different, like you can write stuff in here. This is kind of cool. You can put your resume in. I obviously haven't done this. It's just a skeleton now, but you can find, if this is something you're motivated to do, this is a good place to start. It actually is a lot faster if you wanted to start up quicker. And that's all I have for the presentation. I'll show you one last thing, which is that interactive data table with the downloading function. So if you wanted to, this actually gets into Shiny apps, but it's okay. It's still like an HTML widget. So this is a map that I built of, so this, I showed you a truncated data set before. This is all of the data. And what I display for each unique well is the median observation over the time bin, that's your time period you're looking at. So from the time period from 1960 to 1989, there may be 20 observations at this one well, but I'm just going to show the median so it's not too clustered temporally. The depth class of the well, you can select, let's look at Department of Water Resources wells and dairy wells as well, just include all the databases. And let's say I only want to look at fresh water, so 0 to 1,000 TDS, so now they're all blue.
So where did this come from? Is this a leaflet map or is this a map?
This is a leaflet map. So all I've done is I've taken 2 HTML widgets, leaflet, and then also the data table here, and I've put them into a Shiny app framework so that I can display my leaflet and my data table in like one interactive place. But before I did this, I had these in Markdown files, and I like had a leaflet that you could play with, and I had a data table you could play with. Where I was like, oh, I should put them all together. And then I put a Markdown file that just put my picture in. So this is like Obama with reading wild things are. And then these are some links that you know how to format. And this is a header 1, right? This is a horizontal line. This is a block quote. These are things you know, right? This is all stuff we can do. So yeah. So
you said to use Shiny to put those together.
Yeah, use Shiny to do this. And so if you've selected data like this, like let's say I only wanted California Department of Water Resources data in deep wells from this time period, that's what's showing right here. And I could download the selected data, and it has the name, CDPH deep, time periods, and then the range of data. And that's all right here. Or I could download all the data, which I won't because it's pretty big. But yeah, so if you had to share data with people, Shiny apps are a good way to do that. And data table's a nice holder for your data frames, and then you can include abilities to download if you need. So I realized I went way over time. I'm super sorry. So thanks for entertaining me, but I hope this is useful.
Definitely, thank you so much.
Cool. Yeah.
And we'll post the video up eventually when I get a chance to update our users website with the materials and everything else.
Cool. Right on. Yeah. Thanks for putting this together, Ryan.
Yeah. All right. So.